Right, we're back. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Ava Technologies. We've got this YouTube channel going where we share the latest news and we share our views in the AI space. So we keep each story to roughly 5 minutes, but we do sometimes go over. Let me just get my timer going. As usual, guys, really appreciate any love, support. Give us a like, costs nothing, but it's very much appreciated. Well, let's dive into the first story. This is the latest in AI. That's right. No, well, we did.
It's not quite AI. First of all, also first, welcome back as well. Welcome back. We missed you.
Thank you.
We all hope you had a good holiday.
So I hope the sound is okay for everybody.
I'm sure it'll be fine for one day.
I'm sure I'll dig it out. It's been sort of hidden away in the bag that we're still unpacking, probably.
Let's also turn off the like.
And we also had the amazing Matt Spence join us yesterday.
I don't know. Yeah, I was going to say I don't know if you caught the episode. It was a fairly long one.
I did.
As is the case with Matt. Normally, we like a long conversation with Matt, and it was a really good. As I said before we get into the article, as I said to Matt at the end of the podcast, I think it's so interesting seeing the different viewpoints of AI. Obviously, Matt coming from a much more technical angle and his opinion of it versus someone that's in marketing, for example, predominantly. And like I said at the very end, again, that's what's amazing about AI is it permeates all jobs, all sides of life, all sides of society, and everyone can come together and have a very interesting and unique perspective on it. So I think it's good to have different guests.
No, definitely. We'll have to drag Matt back on more often, I think.
We will, but for now, let's jump into the first article. This is one you found, Ben, and we're umming and ahhing about putting it in, and that's pretty much because we know absolutely nothing about rockets.
Yeah.
But I think, as Ben will probably agree in a second, I think we want to keep it because although we don't know anything about rockets, we find this super awesome. I love seeing news like this. I find the technology behind it just utterly incredible. I mean, look at all those booster rockets. They're only about 6 months behind schedule from going to Mars. You know, it's still, even now, even all these years later, there's still a space race between China and America, and you know, it's not the Soviet Union now. It's China racing to the moon and to Mars. But yeah, amazing technology. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, you know what? Like you said, I think we were umming and ahhing about whether to sort of chat about this because it's not really our thing. We tend to talk about AI, and I mean, we do talk about future technologies, including crypto and Bitcoin and other things. Robotics, I think we've even mentioned before, self-driving vehicles and all the rest of it, because it all has relevance, and AI is all sort of part of that story. So they're not to be spoken about in silence. So there is that, you know, clear overlap. And I think the thing that grabbed me was I had no idea, and I don't know if many of you listeners out there, that SpaceX are planning to get this rocket to Mars next year. I mean, that's mental. They're actually, their aim is to launch an unmanned, let me just clarify, so it's no humans, an unmanned rocket to Mars next year.
And I think the key with what SpaceX are doing, because obviously we've sent probes and we've sent like rovers and even drones to Mars, and little helicopters even. I watched a video on when they sent little helicopters that accompanied the Mars rovers. And so we've sent things to Mars before, but what's different about this is the largest spaceship that SpaceX have ever built and launched. It was successful, and this is like the predecessor to what's going to be the manned missions to Mars. Like these proper, I mean, these are not just like probe rockets. These are full-on heavy-duty, I don't know the technical term, but massive rockets.
Yeah, they're big.
They're big. So, super cool, isn't it? Super cool.
Yeah, the article mentioned. I mean, obviously they're planning to. They're getting things in place to simulate, you know, what actually is going to have to happen, aren't they? They're
exactly.
Going to get this rocket into orbit, and then they're going to have to send more rockets up to fuel it. And there's a process that they've obviously planned and thought about how we actually can physically get there, where we need to do X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. So they're sort of just getting through their sort of process of testing and refining. So no, I think let's wrap it up, mate. That's really just a quick story, just something to share with everybody. I think, I mean, we've talked about the next 5 years changing dramatically for AI. I think by 2030, we're talking about the potential of AGI coming. We could also see a man on Mars at the same time. Indeed, it might be required to have AGI to help with that mission. With
again,
we've talked about.
It's not particularly documented or spoken about, but again, with Elon Musk owning SpaceX, you do wonder how much AI has played a part in planning and execution of some of this mission. I mean, I don't know, that's speculation, but you'd like to think so, that they all interlink.
Timer, boom, let's go.
Let's do it, let's move on.
That's 5 minutes.
Let me put it on the screen. We're back to AI for sure now. I try to pick out some stories sometimes that have linked to what we've previously talked about, to have some continuity to what we say. And this is one of them. This is a piece of news literally directly out of Anthropic, one of the leading frontier labs in America. They make Claude code. They make just the Claude on the desktop and on the web, like you'd use ChatGPT. A very capable model. And now they are piloting it as a Chrome extension. Now, the reason I picked this out is because Chrome extensions, not because Chrome extensions are particularly interesting. They're notoriously boring. But this is interesting because I don't know if you remember, Ben, but I don't know. I think must have been a couple of weeks now ago. We've spoken about a couple of things, which is Perplexity attempting to buy Chrome, which is another leading frontier lab, with AI, and they are building AI browsers. They're building Comet, which is built on top of Chrome, which is an AI-powered browser. And this is an interesting one because this is Anthropic not building a browser, but just plugging directly into Chrome. There seems to be a bit of a race to have some sort of AI in the browser where you can interact with your tabs a bit more dynamically. You can get, in this case, Claude can fill out forms for you, navigate around, do different things. And again, it's just another step, another solution to having AI in the browser. Now, before I ask your opinion, Ben, I'm not sure I 100% get it. I mean, so another one is by the browser company of New York. They've built Dia. That's a fairly beautiful browser. I mean, it's lovely UI with AI integrated. Perplexity have Comet. Now this. I don't really find them particularly useful, if I'm honest with you. I'm not. I've tried to use it. I've tried to want to use it. I think the closest I've found to it being useful to me is getting it to summarize a large article. And that's only really since we've started this podcast where I'm like, let's get some headline points here that I can talk about. Let's try and get it to summarize this article. But it's only one step removed from copying and pasting the URL into Google Gemini, for example, or ChatGPT, and asking it to summarize. So I'm not entirely sure I get the hype of having AI directly in the browser. Maybe it's me. Everyone's got different use cases. But yeah, that's my opinion.
Is it because I guess in browser AI it does make sense to me in the sense of it saves a user having to jump from one AI tool, go to one website and then have to go to another website to do some other action potentially. So I guess it sort of logically makes sense as a possible first step. That makes sense. So it's going to be limited, isn't it, in terms of, it's going to be limited to what a browser can do, like mostly reading, writing information on web pages. Maybe it might be able to, maybe interact with certain things that are on your web page.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
And I guess the article does talk about some of the security risks of that, which are potentially big because obviously if you're, online banking, for example, what could happen there? Dealing with malicious emails, maybe things like that. I think they talked about how it can help, or their mitigations and their plans for that. I don't know. It's almost like it feels to me like it's like the first layer. But do you think like those things, the MCPs, the modular command protocols that we sort of talked about, do you think that would be the next layer, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's It's interesting. On the surface, like AI in the browser, it sounds like an interesting idea. It's just one of those things that then when you use it, you're like, oh, is this actually really that much faster, like than just browsing around normally? I feel that it's somewhat just trying to shoehorn AI into everything possible. When you have Claude for desktop, or you have just ChatGPT, or you can talk about it. I don't see massive benefits to having it directly integrated into the browser. I do see much more value in tools that run on your desktop computer, for example, that uses MCPs to maybe integrate with other services. So you don't actually ever open MailChimp, for example. You interact with MailChimp through a command line or a desktop piece of software where you're chatting with the AI, and the AI has access to MailChimp, and you use it as an assistant. You go, send this email to all of my customers that have bought in the last 6 months, and then it will do that. I think that's much more useful. But AI in the browser just going, can you open a tab on MailChimp and then tell me? I just don't necessarily understand that premise, to be honest.
That's really interesting, because from a user's perspective, the time's going to hit.
That's all right. Let's roll on and finish your point.
Okay, we're breaking our rules. We're breaking our rules. It's interesting because what you mentioned there, it's what is the, from a user's perspective, and again, I come from, I guess, like you mentioned, the difference between Matt coming from a technical perspective, talking yesterday. I come from, I guess, the marketing perspective, but also the user's perspective in terms of what does it mean for the user, and for the user doesn't care like whether they're using MailChimp or another email provider. They just want that action to be taken. So what's the easiest path for the users? Just say, just email this, bang. We don't, rather than, I've got to log into MailChimp, I've got to do this, it's a path of least resistance. So once that integration's, done with the MCPs, to me, that seems like a much better user interface than constantly thinking about what's the best, this for this and that for that, and jumping on this. And, do you know what I mean?
The thing is with the AI browser is that it's still a browser that you can interact with like you would with Chrome or Brave or Arc or whatever you happen to use. It's no different. It's just there's an assistant there that you can click, and you can ask it to do things with your tabs. And I don't know. Again, it's part of this thing like in the crypto space where we're at this frontier of things where you'll have some great utility, others it's not so. It's just trying to shoehorn it in. AI is one of the big things, so let's put it in the browser. Why not?
Interesting. Just a thought is, I think I could see a future where these MCPs are almost built within the computer hardware. That makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
You'll get probably a bespoke element where users can set up what who they want to connect with, but you'll also, I think, have a battle for those providers to be the chosen sort of default ones. That when you buy a Mac, you have your MCPs already loaded up with MailChimp, another piece of software, another piece of software, and there'll be like a default, I guess. Menu that they'll be given to you as a consumer. I've got my email here, I've got this here, and I've got that there, and these are, and I just have to interact with my computer, and I just say, send an email, bang. MailChimp just happened to do it behind the background. So that's an interesting perspective as well. I think
I happen to agree with you, and I think my last point before I'm happy with this one. I mean, obviously you can add something as well, but I think that's the good point here, is that I think AI is more useful at an even lower level, built into the operating system of the device, not into different applications on the computer. Why would I need just an AI within this little window of a browser when I use other applications? I use Photoshop, I use VS Code for coding, I use CapCut for editing, I listen to music on Spotify. I have loads of different programs on my computer that I use. Wouldn't it make sense for the AI to be even lower level, so that it can choose to interact with browser-based services like MailChimp, as we've been using, but also I can get it to interact with my CapCut editing software or my VS Code. I think it's more compelling to have it lower level again, not just in the browser.
No, I think that feels like the natural progression, and this feels a bit
Agreed.
superficial first layer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool.
Right.
Okay.
Move on to the next one.
That was interesting.
Very.
Next one. 5 minutes. Let's
Oh,
go.
this is gonna be a deep one, Ben. I know how you feel about deep ones in the morning, deep conversations. This is quite a long article, and it's titled "In Search of AI Psychosis." And again, to summarize, there is what you'll find a lot of the time is it's quite anecdotal. We're only starting to get some studies on how AI impacts society, really, because it's so new, right? I mean, we'll get a lot more of this over the coming decade, I'm sure. But at the moment, there's a lot of anecdotal, a couple of studies. And this one explores particularly how, again, AI chatbots sort of aid and abet in people's delusions, mental illnesses, potentially, because they're designed to be sort of just a general purpose, unbiased chatbot that will just talk to you, and it shouldn't hold any particular opinion. What you find is that is actually not a good thing, because it right now affirms a huge amount of belief in people that maybe they shouldn't be told this is the case. Again, we've spoken about this. This is what I mean about continuity. We've spoken about this as well, and this is just an onward step from that, where we're starting to get some numbers and studies, but also just thinking about how to solve that problem. So yeah, it's a very interesting article. It's quite a long read, but what are your thoughts on this kind of thing?
Yeah, well, we did talk about this before, didn't we? A few days back, and it's that danger of the AI sort of just reinforcing somebody's thoughts or beliefs, and we've heard those horror stories where somebody I can't remember what it was. Somebody did some sort of horrific crime, and it was prompted by the AI saying, "Yeah, you should do that." So I think that's the danger: is it can send people down a rabbit hole, and reinforcing their own opinions. And it's unlike a human, which will actually, like a good friend or family member, who may be more willing to give you, the hard truths, because they actually deeply care about you. They want you to make mistakes or help guide you in the right direction. Then it's AI doesn't seem to do that, and it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. I mean, if you've ever just played with AI and just keep asking its questions, and you start going deeper, it just it then prompts other thoughts, and it just gets, and so it goes down to a real rabbit hole. So you can see how people who have mental health issues, or even just people in general, I mean, the danger is it can. I mean, again, I think we read something or talked about sort of narcissism. That reinforcing that person. If an AI is constantly telling you you're right and is not often giving you pushback, then it's almost is AI training our minds in that sense.
Yeah. Well, so there's a couple of interesting points that come out of this that we didn't talk about last time. Is one, its effect on children and access for children, because when you have something that is basically like a sycophant, where it's just essentially affirming everything that you believe in. If you have an argument and you say your side of the argument, it'll go, yes, I completely understand why you feel like that. And then here's, again, in children, that's where they're still building up their moral compass of what's right and what's wrong, through learned experience. Having a chatbot that just again can essentially breed narcissism if you let it, that's a very dangerous thing. And then the second point to this is, how do you stop it? So if you don't give any guardrails, then you end up with, basically, it will just be a mirror of whatever you want to talk about with it, and you end up in this spiral of affirmation. But if you add guardrails to it, who decides on the guardrails? Who's to say that your opinions are the correct opinions to share and to distill into this AI? I mean, different cultures believe in different things. Who's to say what's right and what's wrong? And then there's the second thing about censorship as well. There's obviously a lot of criticism, again, behind ChatGPT 5 that came out, that GPT-5, the model, is incredibly biased and incredibly guardrailed, and you can't get it to break its safety rules at all. And that's, again, probably more of a good thing than a bad thing, but it does bring up a question like, shouldn't I be able to chat about whatever I want with an AI? You know, I pay for it, or I have it on my computer. It's mine. Why can't I chat about what I want?
That is a good question.
We can move on if you would like, or you can say something in reply. Up to you.
Let's move on. I think that's left a thoughtful viewers and listeners to ponder.
It's true. Well, again, I don't have an answer to you. It's like,
but it's something
we
are very much thinking about with our AI therapeutic assistant Ava Mind.
Well, we have to, don't we? We have to think about it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
check it out on the App Store, guys. Download it. It's free.
Amazing. Let's get into the last one, which is a more technical one. It's for the more technical audience out there. But also, you know, it equally permeates a lot of different things. And this is something known as the context window problem. It's colloquially known as a few different things. But this is the case of when GPT 3.5 came out as ChatGPT, the token limit was tiny. I can't remember the exact token limit, but it was something like 4,000 to 8,000 tokens, which for, you know, one token is basically one word. One token is less than a word, but it's marginally less. So you can consider 4,000 tokens to be 4,000 words, which sounds like a lot. But now we're getting into this world where we're using AI for long range tasks within the coding world specifically. You know, we're running long-term thought processes and programming where it's using a lot of context. And something like Claude Sonnet has about 250,000 K token window, 250,000 words, which seems mind-blowing, but it gets eaten up so quickly because your code base is massive, back and forth, there's more context. So we hit this problem called context rot, where the AI gets particularly bad at understanding the more data that it has in that context. It can't quite distinguish what context it should use. It loses track of what's useful and what isn't. And it's also incredibly expensive because, you know, most of these AI providers charge by the context token used. And as you're coding with it, you can rack up 1 million tokens over the course of half an hour probably. And then your every request is costing you $1, say. It's very expensive. So this article is talking about how we can try to solve some of this context window problem, which also leads a little bit into the marketing, a little bit into the user end. Because if we can crack this context problem, we have an AI that is far better at remembering things long term. Because that's another thing, is your AI, every time you go back onto it, it's lost track of it. It has to regather all the context. It doesn't know anything about you. So how do we have super long-term context like we would, where we have long-term memories, and how do we bring that into AI? So it's a very interesting field of study, but it will have amazing impacts. It means, again, greater personalization, greater long-term use. And ChatGPT for Will be very different from ChatGPT for Ben, because we have different context managements. It remembers different things about us, and it deals with that long-term memory better. That's essentially it.
Yeah, that's really interesting work. It's very, very, very true in terms of context sort of getting worse and worse. I mean, I use it a lot in terms of some of the marketing materials and information that we produce, and you certainly notice it when you start asking it for more and more sort of, edits. It almost gets worse and worse, and sometimes you've almost got to start again and start from scratch. It's very interesting.
Our only solution right now is to have a bigger context window, which has been done. We've got the biggest context windows at the moment are about 1 million tokens. That's not to say the quality isn't dreadful once it fills up that 1 million tokens. But other than that, we just keep stacking context in. This is what I was saying this to Matt a little bit yesterday. We were talking about how we improve AIs overall. And it's not just necessarily about making the model smarter in terms of what it knows. There's several fields of study, and memory management, context management is another one of those things. At the moment, it's so rudimentary. We just stack context on context on context. And that's not how we think. That's a part of how we think, but also we have much longer range context and memory retrieval.
And that ultimately means there's going to be more cost, isn't it? When you're just sort of brute forcing it to sort of memorize more and more information, it's just going to be needing more compute, surely.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, yeah. So the bigger the model is, obviously the more expensive. They released GPT 4.5, I think it was called, and that was a gargantuan model. It wasn't particularly good. It was humongous, very expensive, and it kind of showed really that bigger models are starting to not really produce better results. Same with context. You know, giving it a greater context window has improved it a bit, but we've hit a limit where more than 1 billion tokens, it's useless anyway. So what we need to do is have better algorithmic techniques. We need to develop other areas beyond just the model itself. How does the model retrieve memories? How does the model store memories? Not necessarily in its own neural network, but in its digital side of things, where it can store it in memory, in terms of on the files on the computer. And that's where we're at now. And we can create much more intelligent experiences for people using it without doing anything crazy different to the model in terms of the size of it. 5 minutes.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. But you know, absolutely. I mean, you bang on. I mean, I think this is where the AI starts understanding the individual in a very personal way. Is certainly the direction we want to go, and I think that has to be the future. Yeah, it's very interesting. But obviously, there's all these technical sort of challenges, and figure out how best to do.
I also think this is where it's great for startups as well, because AI has been traditionally very hard to get into, to develop like models themselves, because the models themselves require a huge amount of financial investment to build. But there's huge fields of study that don't require you to build new models. How can you optimize existing ones? How can you build scaffolding and frameworks around the models to make them smarter, unhobble them, get them to deal with data properly? Yeah, how can you get them to reason better? How can you get them to use memory better? How can you build tools that the AIs these models can use? So actually, now we've got these models to a size and an intelligence level that they are at, where the progress is now much slower. We can now offer, and it opens the market for a lot smaller businesses, a lot smaller tech companies to think about, right, how can we take this foundational technology and build around it to make it even better? You know, how can we do these different things?
I guess that's where the MCPs potentially come in as well, isn't it? They can just sort of choose to use, we need to use this program for this memory, or this for this strategy, or this for this reason that I need to think about.
Absolutely one side. That's absolutely one side of it. Again, what we're doing at Ava Mind, but within building the app, is we're not necessarily building a foundational model. We'll use existing models, small ones that can run on device, but here's where we have to innovate. How do we run it on device? How do we roll that out to people? How do we have smart fallback for people that don't necessarily have devices that can run it? How do we do memory? Because again, none of this is built into the foundation models themselves. So we actually have to do a lot of posterior technological innovation to make Ava Mind the product that it's going to be. And that's what's great. It's not tied off to people, big frontier labs and massive tech companies in the Fortune 500. There's room for everybody to make advancements in this field.
Fantastic. That's really interesting. Brilliant. Well, I think that we've covered all the talking points and shared our views.
We have.
I hope the audience got something out of it, something to think about, and some takeaways. As ever, guys, give us a like, give us a subscribe. We really appreciate it. And we will wrap up, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow. Yeah, Friday tomorrow. So
see you tomorrow.
Take care, guys.